Yes, it was no small scene that Frank and Ben, along with the other passengers, witnessed just as the bus was pulling into the little Western Ontario town of Blood River. Carlotta Hardbottom had worked herself up into a fury when the balding, bespectacled young man persisted in attacking her feminist views. Things got truly out of hand when she called into question the young man's intelligence. This was rather strange because, besides being older than Carlotta, the balding, bespectacled young man spoke every bit as well as her. Indeed, he seemed to have read every bit as much as she had. But the sort of intelligence that comes from simply reading and not being particularly sensitive to other people's moods and inclinations, or even to one's own, can also be limited and in certain circumstances resemble stupidity. Take Carlotta, for example. As intelligent as she is, it was rather stupid of her to insult the balding, bespectacled young man because it only made him lose his temper and become as angry and upset as she was. She definitely didn't make the situation better and certainly showed poor judgment. She certainly shouldn't have attacked him on a personal level. In a very short time, both Carlotta and the young man were shouting at each other at the tops of their lungs. Each was calling the other names and acting like a little child. If it hadn't been for the bus coming to a full stop and the other passengers, some of whom were definitely fed up with all that was going on, getting to their feet and crowding into the aisle to get off the bus, it's quite likely that Carlotta would have become violent. It certainly seemed she was ready to fly at the balding, bespectacled young man at any moment with her rubbery fists. And it was only because Frank and Ben intervened that she didn't throw her books at him. They tried to calm her down as best they could, but not meeting with much success. It was a good thing the two young women who sit across the aisle from them intervened and offered some assistance. They too got into the act by appealing to Carlotta's better judgment and trying to calm her down. They tried to get her to control her emotions. Definitely it was a blessing for all concerned when the balding, bespectacled young man finally got off at Blood River. However, it certainly didn't help matters that he continued to hurl insults at Carlotta right to the very moment he stepped off the bus. On the other hand, once he got off, the worst of it was over. It was a fortunate thing that he didn't have to get back on it. Frank and Ben could see him being greeted by people who were waiting for him in Blood River. They looked like members of his family. They greeted him with open arms and hugged and kissed him. Then they listened with worried expressions as he explained to them all that had just happened. In the meantime, while all the people were getting off the bus as quickly as they could, Carlotta stayed on it with Frank and Ben and the two young women. Even later, when the other passengers were all in the restaurant eating or else smoking outside, she continued to rage and talk about the incident in the most passionate way. She made all sorts of heated comments about the young man and men in general. So many of them, she said almost tearfully at the end, haven't learned the slightest thing. Now, with the bus having finally left Blood River and going down the highway that runs along Lake Superior, all has become relatively quiet and peaceful. Carlotta has fallen asleep again, and Frank and Ben stare out the window at the vast expanse of water. From time to time, Ben reads the Asterix comic book that he borrowed from the 10-year-old boy who came up to them earlier to ask for Frank's autograph. The two young women sitting across the aisle from them shift and squirm in their seats. They keep changing the way they sit in them. They try a lot of different positions to get comfortable. They are trying to find the most comfortable position to get a bit of sleep. During the 40-minute stop in Blood River, Frank and Ben had the chance to get to know them better. The plain-looking but kind and sympathetic woman sitting near the window, before she was sitting near the aisle, is called Manon, and the extremely attractive but rather standoffish one sitting near the aisle, before she was sitting near the window, is called Genevieve. As Frank and Ben found out when they were having a snack with them in Blood River's one and only restaurant, they are both Franco-Ontarians and both second-year students at the University of Ottawa. They are both very intelligent and well-spoken, and Frank and Ben, despite having the first chance to speak French to someone besides each other since their encounter with a friendly security guard in Winnipeg who helped them out of a bad situation, felt a bit clumsy and inept when they were with them in the restaurant. It wasn't so bad at first when the conversation was focused on Carlotta and what a strange person she is and how angrily and even violently she had reacted to the balding, bespectacled young man's criticisms of her feminist views. Later, however, when Manon and Genevieve started talking about their university courses in the fall, Frank and Ben felt a bit uncomfortable. Each in his own way felt uneasy and out of his element. Each felt not capable of holding up his end of the conversation. Each had the feeling that he was neither old enough nor sophisticated enough to interest these young women. It was a bit depressing and made each of them wish he was back in Perkins with friends and family.